morning. Good morning. I come to you today, the Enchantress One, aka Honey T, also known as the Yin's Star. And that star would be fixed that I'm speaking of, and I will label it Antares. Antares. Okay, coming today. I do have a whole lot to say. I sitting here starting my day and partaking of nature and watching what it does every single day. And I just started thinking about my childhood, and I started thinking about my grandfather, who is so dear to me. Yes, he's very dear to me, and he's my mother's father. Didn't know my dad's father. Yeah, just didn't know him. Well, anyway, so my mother's dad had a profound effect on me even till today, and it's just a beautiful thing. I remember when I was about 4 or 5, I recall him, making note his concern for me being left-handed. And at this time, my grandfather was a deacon in a missionary Baptist church, and this was back in the 60s, guys. I was born in 63, so it had to be about 68. And so he just made concern about me writing with my left hand. And if I'm not mistaken, and if I recall accurately, I think that he even made attempts to coerce me to use my right hand. And so, growing up, that never happened. But I do have that fond memory of him, and I just remember little things about him. Um, he was missing a finger, a ring finger, on his left hand. I remember that. He was about 6'4", 6'3", and he had a gold crown on one of his teeth. And he had this shape of his skull that was indicative for the Davis family, and it was always cute to me. But he provided for me things that create these fond memories, and I always felt like he was watching over me, even after his departure from this physical aspect. But yeah, he did. He attempted to change the dominancy of my dexterity. And it's so amazing because when I became an adult after I turned 30, and I recall being in college again, as a single parent attempting to achieve a degree in chemical engineering. But I just had these hardships, that loomed around my personal life because I was a single parent. And at that time, I didn't have a car. And I live on the West Bank of New Orleans, and I attended UNO, so that meant that I would have to commute public transit. And so it would take me 2 point some odd hours to get there and almost the exact time to get back. So that's 5 hours of my life a day that was tied up in just, you know, getting to and fro to campus. So I would schedule my classes that I would only attend Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so that I wouldn't have to endure that, 5 days a week. And I did that for, years. But it got to a point that I had a thesis that was due. And during this time, we would manually write these papers, okay? And when I got ready to write, my hand would cramp up and it would send signals to my brain that would stress me in ways that I wasn't accustomed to. So I would attempt to do this paper and it wouldn't come out properly. It wouldn't be legible. And then I'd ball it up and start over again. And I went through this over and over and over to the point that I was so frustrated. And I sat there and said, "You look, you have to complete this. So you need to figure out something else." So I decided, since the left hand was not cooperating with the brain, let's see if the right hand would be willing to do it. And so within about 36 hours, I had trained and retrained and conditioned myself to write this paper with my less dominant hand, which was my right hand. And I must say that when that paper was completed, it was pleasantly far more legible than if I had written it with my left hand. And I would take things that I had written with my left hand and hold it up in comparison, and I would just, me, myself, even having gone through it and knowing the steps that I had to take to get to that within that short amount of time, even amaze myself. And I was able to complete that thesis, and I received an A- on that. And because of all that I had gone through, I felt some type of way about that, and I felt like structurally, grammatically, and even with the content and the way it was composed, that I deserved more than that. So I challenged the professor, and he would not move. So I went to his department head and presented it, and he read it and agreed. And so my grade was increased, and so that was victory for me. And I remember, after that, when it got to a point, these are things that typically have happened in my life. Okay, I got to a point in my studies where I was at the halfway mark with this degree, and I was in a program that offered me a stipend that would help me with my children, and also was a program that would connect me with certain employment opportunities after I graduated. So to do this was exciting to me. And I got to a point where I was at the halfway mark. And I can't remember who got sick first. And I had to take time off of that because they couldn't go to school. And then the other one got sick. So I went through a cycle of all three of my children becoming sick. And I had to miss that much of class because they couldn't go back to school until these certain symptoms were no longer there. And I missed key testing. And if I remember accurately, I think it was midterm. All I remember is I didn't meet those assignments and that testing, and it affected my grades. So that meant that if I didn't find a way to rectify that I would lose my grant. And so I went to each of one of my professors, and I went to my French professor, and I was minoring in French, and he didn't even finish listening to the whole story. And he was like, "Of course," he said, you comprehend the language wonderfully," he said, "and I want to see you succeed." He said, "Of course I'll allow you to do that." He said, "So what you do is when you take this exam, I will allow it to count for this and that," which put me in a wonderful position because I had an A in that class anyway. Now, I went to my psychology professor. He agreed, and I was able to come out of that class with a C, because I really didn't like that class. But anyway, so I went to my sociology professor, and that class I was I think I had a C in that class. I didn't like that class either. And I chemistry class I was struggling in. So it's a chemistry and sociology. Couldn't pull the chemistry up. I couldn't. I just that wasn't even addressed. The chemistry class. So I was having my grades be affected by chemistry, sociology and psychology. The other classes were fine. And I went to my sociology professor, and he was sitting there. He didn't even look at me when I was telling him my story. And when I finished, he said, "Well," he said, "I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to give you something that you don't deserve." And he said, furthermore, he said, "You should really think about the choices that you make in life. And you should make certain that you choose partners that will support you and not leave you single." And it hurt. But something about me knew that what he was saying was accurate. And I took it to heart, even though my feelings and my emotions were, you know, prevalent. And I left out, and eventually I lost my Pell Grant, and I couldn't graduate. So after that, I was like, okay, what are you going to do now, girl? These children are looking at you to demonstrate what you say you are, and you're just failing time and time and time again. So I had decided that I was going to become a part of the federal government system, and I applied for the FBI position in the FBI. Testing came up, flew through it, passed through it wonderfully. Background check wonderfully. I'm not a person that gets into a lot of trouble. I don't cause a lot of trouble for others, purposefully. Um, and so the background was pristine. And I had just moved to Texas, and so my living arrangement was rocky. And I was living with this elderly woman who had her parents died at an early age, and so at the age of 8, she had to raise her baby brother and her sister. And that story always amazed me because I'm like, was there no CPS? But this was back in the tweens, and so she raised them. But anyway, so she she didn't understand my progressive nature, and I think sometimes it made her feel some type of way, and she would do things too that I thought she was attempting to sabotage, but I couldn't prove. And so I, let her know that I had applied for the FBI and that, I passed or whatever, just sharing my success. And I was, kept waiting to hear from the FBI, about what was the next step, what goes next, because I didn't know the protocol of this. And she had a son who had a baby by a young lady who had become, friendly, and she would be there at the house sometimes. And she came and she told me that I had gotten a second response from the FBI, and that was a second level to me being, me joining the FBI. And it had come to the house, and that lady had intercepted it and kept it from me. So I missed my appointment. And that was crazy. But anyway, so I remember when I went to the initial testing for the FBI, and there was this gentleman there, and I was telling him the story of how I went from writing with my left hand, dominant hand, to my right hand and what transpired. And he sat there and he looked at me. He said, "Do you know that there are laboratories and there are scientists that would pay you so that they could study you by hearing the story that you just told me?" And I was like, nah, I'm not interested. And I kept it moving. But yeah, so my grandfather tried to coerce me to use my less dominant hand when writing. And all those years later, I go through that, what I just explained. That's That's amazing to me. It's intriguing. So I just wanted to come and share that with you guys. Another aspect or deposition. I hope that your day is filled with little surprises of pleasantry that you were not expecting. And I hope the same happens for me.